We're back on the Thicc podcast, and today we will be ranking tight ends, specifically the top 10. Now, the tight end is one of the most undervalued positions in all of football. They're versatile, they're powerful blockers, they're elite route runners, and they really don't get paid as much as they should. I know my co-host has been banging the table about that point for years now. So let's get right into the video with a few honorable mentions. And I've got three guys I really think deserve the honorable mention spot, but I'll go ahead and throw a fourth one in there to placate some of the casual fans. Those three being Jonnu Smith, Isaiah Likely, Evan Ingram, and for the sake of discussion, I'll put Travis Kelce on the list. And you'll notice a common trend among those four players. None of those four players are actually tight ends. Kelce more so than the other three because he actually gets down blocks a little bit still. But those are three slot receivers who are oversized, not that quick, and don't do that much work deep downfield. Can do some stuff deep, but they're slot receivers. They're versatile, they've got value, sure, but I feel icky putting them on the top 10 tight ends list. There are some guys who also fall into that category who I will mention on the list who aren't really good blockers, who very rarely have their hand in the dirt, but those three are the particular example I point to. Isaiah Likely barely blocks. Evan Ingram is a wide receiver, and Jonnu Smith, I don't even want to get into Jonnu Smith. I'm sure you'll have him in the top 10, the fancy merchant that you are, so we can talk about him then, but those are my honorable mentions.
Well, our conversation prior to the podcast, I'm inclined to kind of bump Jonnu Smith out of my top 10. I have him right at 10, but I just disagree with the sentiment that you're bumping some of those guys out of the top 10 because they play more of that big slot role and they don't necessarily have their hand in the dirt as much as like a George Kittle, who's probably the best blocking tight end in the NFL, who's also a high-level receiving tight end. So I'm not dinging these guys as much as you are for them playing more of that slot receiver / tight end role.
It'll never get done, but I'm going to pound the table that it's a different position. Like, I don't think these are bad players. I'm not digging them per se. If it was just rank NFL players, I'd probably have them higher than some of the guys that got on here, but I really do think being a tight end means you're also a blocker.
Well, I think the receiver position, if we're going to compare the two, there's multiple ways to play every position. We see some receivers dominate and play primarily on the outside. Brian Thomas Jr. There's some receivers that are used in the slot to operate, going across the field, out-breaking route. So I think there's multiple ways to play different positions, and not every receiver is the same, much like not every tight end is the same. So as far as like my honorable mentions go, I have Colston Loveland there sitting on the outside. I am high on both rookie tight ends that were drafted in the first round. The reason I didn't have him slated into my top 10 is he's competing for a lot of targets over there in Chicago. They drafted Luther Burden. They drafted Rome Odunze last year, DJ Moore, DeAndre Swift in the backfield. They still have Cole Kmet, who's going to draw some targets. He's certainly a better blocker than Colston Loveland is now. So I don't think we're really going to see Colston Loveland emerge as a major threat to defenses in his first year as a rookie. I also have before recording, had Mark Andrews as an honorable mention. Now I'm going to slide him into 10, and I have Jonnu Smith on the outside looking in. And some people, if they're more fantasy brain, are like, how do you have Jonnu Smith on the outside of the top 10? When you look at his production last year, a lot of it was manufactured by the coaching staff. He had more targets than Jalen Waddle, more catches than Tyreek Hill. His average yards per reception was 42 amongst tight ends, even if he had all of those yards, and I believe it was around 8 touchdowns. So he's not exactly an extremely developed route runner, getting open against zone coverage. He's not an extremely high-level blocker, and the coaches just use his athleticism and put him in places where he can excel.
If you're running behind Jonnu Smith, you're giving up a tackle for loss. He's going to catch a ton of passes next season, comparatively speaking, to some tight ends. He'll probably have 500-600 yards, but he's going to clearly be the third fiddle receiving threat in his own offense. They're probably going to prefer to run than give the ball to him. It's not to trash Jonnu Smith. He's had a very successful NFL career, bounced around like I'm glad he's finally found a home. But when you're looking for good, solid tight ends, you're not just looking for raw production, which really, Jonnu Smith's only saving grace is his raw production. Anyway, at my number 10, I've got Will Dissly. And this is the last I'm really going to pound the table about the importance of being a blocker. Will Dissly is, I think, the second or third best blocking tight end in football and is capable of doing enough in the receiving game to get by. The reason the Chargers ran so much outside the tackles is, one, because the interior of their offensive line was an absolute mess last season, but it's also because Dissly was there. He could also double team a defensive end, climb up to a linebacker, get in space, hit a safety. J.K. Dobbins had 1,000 yards from scrimmage. Gus Bus had however much he had because Will Dissly was on the Chargers. He will be on a Jim Harbaugh-led team or a hard-nosed running team for the entirety of his career, and he's going to have a 12, 13, 14-year career because he just hangs around and blocks, does the dirty work. He's kind of similar to what Mo Alley Cox was at a point in time for me. Mo Alley Cox has obviously aged out of that bit, now a special teams guy in the Indianapolis Colts, but just a hard-nosed run blocker who makes his team way better.
I can appreciate the role a player like Will Dissly plays in an offense, the role he plays in the Chargers offense, to be that blocking tight end who gives you an advantage that not every other team has, but he just doesn't offer enough from a receiving production in the Chargers offense or during his time with the Seahawks to be labeled as one of the 10 best tight ends in the NFL. And Travis Kelce, even though he's old, gives you more in that respect to threaten a defense than someone like Will Dissly does. So I think he doesn't have enough receiving production to be in that top 10 tight end category.
He also played in an offense which does not pass the ball a ton, still had 500 yards, an offense which, when they get down to the red zone, is going to run the ball a lot. So the touchdowns are not going to be readily apparent. I give some guys a bump or take away from them depending on the offenses they're in. If you're a run-first team, I have less faith in you as a tight end. Don't blame you as much if you don't have 10 receiving touchdowns, because obviously the Eagles preferred to run it near the end zone, or rather push it near the end zone. There are other teams like that, or other players like that I'll get to later on this list. I don't want to penalize him for that, but I think Will Dissly's awesome and very underappreciated. Maybe I could have had him as an honorable mention, but having him at 10 lets me talk about him a little bit more, so hey.
My number 10, I know I mentioned it already, it was Mark Andrews. I still think he's a high-level player. I think Isaiah thinks a little bit more highly of him compared to the rest of the tight ends in the NFL, but he has taken a step back athletically a little bit. He's not quite dominating with the close to 1,000-yard seasons we have come used to. We've seen some mistakes from him, banged up with injury here and there, but he offers you something as a blocker. He's certainly an excellent red zone threat, so he's a more developed as a route runner in one-on-ones and all the things you want a tight end to do than someone like Jonnu Smith is.
Yeah, I think very highly of Andrews. I'll mention him later on the list. I'm not going to argue with the replacement of him. Clearly, we view some things differently. At number 9, I've got David Njoku. And Njoku only played 11 games last season. That is the story of his career. He's been banged up, hobbled by injury, a lot at 500 yards in those games. But still a productive red zone threat, still a very good blocker. And the thing you've got to look at with Njoku, he has been shackled with awful quarterback play throughout the entirety of his career. He has still found a way to bruise at a relatively high level. That first-round pick has done him some disservice. He didn't live up to the hype of that early in his career, but now that we have gotten on a bit 5-6 years in, he's really rounding into one of those top 10 high-level tight end guys you can have faith in will catch the ball if you put it in his general zip code. Also, impeccable fashion sense, which probably bumped him up a spot or two on my list. But I have a lot of respect for David Njoku. I really do wish he could get on a team with a functional quarterback who could maybe scramble a little bit, let Njoku settle down in zones, and then get the ball in his hands and let him do some dirty work. But never happening if he stays in the Browns.
Yeah, he's someone who has struggled with injury over the last 3 seasons here. There, he's certainly been banged up, but he has put up a lot of production, and we haven't really been able to see him in the best possible situation because he hasn't had a quarterback consistently getting him passes where he can really build a relationship with on the field, build some consistency with, and see the best version of him. So the reason I don't have him on my list is we haven't really seen that, but I certainly can see why someone would value that high-end upside he offers with his athletic potential and what he has produced and accomplished on the field. At number 9, I do have Travis Kelce. I still think he is one of the 10 best tight ends in the NFL, and there are Chiefs haters out there or people that look at Travis Kelce's athleticism diminishing, the fact that the yards per reception went drastically off a cliff, the fact he's not really close to the Travis Kelce that put up 1,300 yards just a few seasons ago, and they say, oh, he sucks. In reality, he still had over 800 yards last year. He was a very productive member of the Chiefs offense, and he got the job done. So 97 catches, 800 yards at this point in his career. Yes, he's a diminished version of himself, but I'm not putting him in the top 5. I'm not saying he's the best tight end in the NFL still, but he's still a top tight end, 10 tight end in the NFL, capable of high-level production.
He's not to me, and I will give Kelce the credit he is due. As his career has progressed, he has clearly gotten better as a blocker, and the fact he is still willing to do that, being the superstar that he is as a 34-year-old dating Taylor Swift, is willing to kick out a defensive end, put put his hand in the dirt. I respect that a lot. If this was a Travis Kelce of olden days with the highest of high-end receiving upsides, being the best zone destroyer in football, then I'd say, okay, maybe this is the greatest tight end ever, but those two things never really coincided. In reality, Kelce was the #1 target of Patrick Mahomes. That is why he had the production that he did. He has so much synergy, so much feel, so much usage with Mahomes that he's going to put up big numbers, sure, particularly if he's the focal point of the Chiefs' passing attack, which he was thanks to Rashee Rice going down when he did with an ACL early in the year. In reality, he's old, he's slow, he's not that good after the catch anymore. The playoff riser we thought he was, he had one good playoff game against the Houston Texans, who were doing everything in the front power, sending linebackers down to get after Mahomes to the extent they could. He ran over some safeties at 100 yards. After that, non-factor in the conference championship game. Really a non-factor in the Super Bowl, though, which Chiefs offensive player besides Worthy was a factor in that game. So, just really diminished, in my opinion. I wouldn't put him in my top 10. I think he's going to keep getting worse and worse. And this is a little bit of projection, so maybe he has the same season again he had in 2024 and 2025. That's a top 10 tight end, but I think it's just going to go even further
He's
down.
diminished, and he's gotten better as a blocker in some ways as he's aged. But I think it is very on the table for him to have at least 600 yards. And if you look at top tight ends when it comes just to receiving production, that's a top 10 tight end season. Now, it's not a typical Travis Kelce season. It's not the Travis Kelce we have come to expect and has been a staple of the Chiefs offense. But I think still in a diminished, even though he's diminished, he's a top 10 tight end.
I mean, it's top 10 if he plays all 17 games and has that much, because other
That's
guys
fair.
are missing time and not hitting that milestone like Kelce would. So also the question is he going to be able to make it through a 16, 17 game season with all the weird dates the Chiefs are playing on as a 35-year-old? That makes me sound like a hater. I'm not wishing him the best, but in reality, it's just sometimes time passes
No,
you
I
by.
think that's a fair reason to potentially leave him off.
My number 8, I've got Tucker Kraft. Arguably the best tight end in football after the catch. Led all tight ends in broken tackles. Absolute monster in open space. Will just destroy a defensive back, destroy a safety. Quality blocker. The route tree, not super refined, not super polished, but he's 24 years old. He's the second youngest guy I've got on this list, and I think he has all the upside in the world. I could see him jumping into the top 5, the top 3 even once he hits his physical prime, gets to be 26, 27 years old. The only issue with him is that he is on a Green Bay Packers offense with about a zillion different wide receivers they need to throw the ball to, and another decent tight end behind him. So the volume may not be quite that high, but Kraft's a good enough target. They will find a way to get the ball in his hands multiple times.
I think the Packers offense is moving more towards having an identity to where they want to get the ball to. I think Tucker Kraft proved last year, 700 yards, a big jump from his rookie season, that he could be a guy for that Packers offense. They have Jacobs. He's certainly going to be a focal point. They just drafted Matthew Golden, which to me signifies a little bit they kind of don't trust the guys they already had in the room. I feel like Jaden Reed, Matthew Golden, Tucker Kraft, and Jacobs, those are going to be the guys the offense revolves around from a receiver and running back, tight end perspective. So I actually have them a little bit higher on the list, but I agree with many of the sentiments you laid out.
I mean, if Watson stays healthy, he's going to get a few shots his way deep every single game. I'm kind of with you. I think they're going to cut at least one, maybe two of the wide receivers we really got familiar with as the season went on last year. But who do you have at 8?
At number 8, I have Evan Ingram, and I think I just value the big slot role when it comes to the tight end position more than you do. He's on the Broncos. He's going to play with Bo Nix. And there's an argument to be made that a healthy Evan Ingram could be the #1 receiving threat in this Broncos offense for Sean Payton to get the ball to. We saw just a couple seasons ago him have close to 1,000 yards on the Jaguars. Last year, he missed 9 games and wasn't really able to be a part of that Jaguars offense that suffered several other injuries. But I think when you have Evan Ingram, who's going to have those mismatch against slower linebackers. He's going to have the size advantage against smaller DBs, and you're going to have Sean Payton drawing up plays for him. I think we're going to see him get a lot of targets, a lot of catches, and be a focal point of the Broncos offense.
The problem with Evan Ingram is twofold. One, I've already gone into that he's just not a blocker. He has no real position in the run game besides going up against a safety and losing that slower than a wide receiver might. He's going to a new system he's going to have to learn. He's going to an offense which is going to be super conservative, which is going to try and win low-scoring games. He's going to a team which already has Cortland Sutton on the outside, who kind of fills that speedy role Ingram might. I just don't think it's going to quite work out for him in 2025. He's also going to be 31 by the time next season starts, coming off an injury. So I just can't see myself putting him on the list.
I understand why you leave him off, especially when it comes down to injury, and you clearly don't value the slot production as much as I do.
Moving on, my number 7 is Dallas Goedert, and he did not play the entirety of 2024, but when he did play, very productive, had almost 50 yards a game, 2 receiving touchdowns, which I do not hold against him because every single time the Philadelphia Eagles got down the red zone, they were trying to get the ball to the 1-yard line so they could shove Jalen Hurts in. In any other system, on any other team, he would probably have 7, 8 receiving touchdowns, but I'm not going to obsess over that. Great blocker, very good route runner. Is at a point in his career where he is not quite the athlete he was in his prime, but as time has progressed, he has adapted. His route tree has gotten better. He knows exactly where to get. And once a play starts kind of breaking down, Hurts either starts scrambling or Barkley gets out into open space, he is always an active blocker. He's always next to him, looking for someone to hit, looking to get in the way of a cornerback or a safety. And I really value that. Goedert, awesome tight end, Super Bowl champion, and number 7 on my list.
Very good tight end. I'm not going to go out and say that Goedert is a bad player, but a lot of the production he does have is wide open because he has Saquon Barkley, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith as a part of his offense, and he's an excellent offensive line blocking for his quarterback. So things are a little bit easier for him. He fit more into that honorable mention category for me, right on the outside of the top 10 looking in. Don't think he's a bad player, but for the sake of my list, he just didn't squeeze in there.
I object to that, but hey, it's your list.
At number 7, I have Tyler Warren, and this placement is going to be way too aggressive for many people. And if you're in love with Tyler Warren and what he did at Penn State, you might even have him higher on your list, which I think would probably be a little delusional. But the size and speed advantage Tyler Warren is going to have in the NFL against linebackers, the size advantage he's going to have against smaller DBs at 6'5", 260, I think I'm not going to say he's going to be Rob Gronkowski, but it is going to be that similar type of advantage for defenses to have to deal with.
Tyler Warren read at 4'6", 840. There are plenty of linebackers in the NFL who are just as fast as that. I don't know if I'd be pushing the speed advantage narrative over linebackers. There are a lot of guys in the NFL
that are 6'5", that are that fast?
You said speed advantage. There are plenty of linebackers running 4.7s, low 4.7s, high 4.6s. There's no real speed advantage there for Warren. I object to that right off the bat, but keep going.
Well, would you say Rob Gronkowski was out there running a 4.4?
No, I wouldn't say that, but Rob Gronkowski is better at running over people than any tight end has ever been in the history of the sport. He was also faster than Warren, so.
The size and speed of Tyler Warren is going to pose a unique threat to defenses, and some people might point to the major question marks the Colts have at quarterback, whether it is Anthony Richardson's lack of accuracy or if Daniel Jones somehow finds his way. Just the fact Daniel Jones is his quarterback. But I think he is a player that with a quarterback that may struggle seeing the field or a quarterback that struggles with accuracy, he is a big target for a quarterback to throw the ball to, and he's going to be a safety blanket for whoever is playing quarterback for him, and they have an excellent run game. So I think he's going to be a very big red zone threat. I think Shane Steichen's going to use his unique skill set in different ways. We saw him run the ball in college. We saw sometimes he even threw the ball in college or lined up in the Wildcat. I think he's going to be used in different ways. I think he has an advantage against whoever's going to guard him. And I have him at number 7 right now.
The only really unique thing about him, he's probably the best quarterback on the Colts roster. The issue with Warren, and this is why I didn't have him on my list, Loveland obviously not going to get a ton of targets as a rookie, at least I don't think. Warren never really created a ton of separation, and for a guy like that, was never that amazing at winning contested catches at Penn State. Great with a ball in his hands, great when you draw something up for him, great when you get a screen pass to him. But as an actual receiving threat with quarterbacks who struggle to throw the ball, struggle to make good decisions, are kind of scared off guys when they're covered, which is exactly what Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson are. I don't know. I think they're really going to have to work to get the ball in his hands rather than just let it flow naturally to him. The advantage the Colts also have, they've got 3 good wide receivers. Presumably, cornerbacks and safeties will have their hands full with Adonai Mitchell, with Michael Pittman, and so on. So maybe that affords them some opportunities against the real bottom end of their opposing team's coverage players, but I don't know. I don't think it's a good fit in Indianapolis. I think Steichen can be a fine coach, sure, but I think he's losing the building and he could conceivably be gone by week 8. And then what?
He played in a Penn State offense.
He was the Penn State offense.
He was the Penn State offense. But, I mean, his most famous play from college is literally a contested catch. I think we saw him win contested catches.
Yeah, his most play, you mean the USC play?
Yeah.
That wasn't even a contested catch. He was so wide open and the quarterback did a bad enough job that it sort of became contested. But that guy didn't start even close to him when Warren started jumping. I don't know if I'd call that a contested catch. I think his most famous play is
What is a contested catch?
That is not a good example of a contested catch. Throw the clip up on the screen. If you have faith in Tyler Warren to catch a bunch of 50-50 balls in the NFL, and those 50-50 balls are really going to be 60-40 in the defense's favor with Daniel Jones throwing them, go for it.
Well, something else that I think is impressive about his college production is that he had no receivers playing alongside him. So he was Penn State's offense outside of their running game because they certainly had two very good running backs.
Still have two very good running backs. I'm not going to split hairs arguing about a rookie. That is purely hypothetical. We will see that. But we will revisit this week 8, and one of us is going to look really stupid. My number 6, I've got Mark Andrews, and that final play of the season really broke a lot of people's brains about Mark Andrews. All they see is the injuries. All they see is the drop passes in the playoffs. That's it. That's all they can imagine Mark Andrews. They want Isaiah Likely to be their tight end one. They want Mark Andrews playing on special teams, maybe getting 5 targets a game at most. They want him just blocking people. Mark Andrews, while an elite run blocker, also led all tight ends in receiving touchdowns, was an absolute menace past the line of scrimmage as a blocker. Would climb up, destroy linebackers, destroy safeties, and one of the more effective receiving tight ends in the game. Close to 700 yards, really a dangerous player while playing alongside Isaiah Likely, who was leeching his targets. Andrews is awesome. I can see him making a Pro Bowl, maybe even an all-pro team at this point. The 6 onward is the guys I really do think are the high-end tight ends, and I just can't imagine not putting Andrews in that conversation based off the poor performance of his playoff game and the injuries. Everything you want your tight ends to do, Mark Andrews can do. Very good route runner for his size. Physically dominant, can run over linebackers in space. He's awesome. If you've got him off the list or lower down the list, I really do scratch my head. I think you're being a prisoner of the last moment he was in.
Well, the reason I have him lower than you do is not necessarily because of the bad moments. I didn't really even take that into consideration. I just think from what we saw from him on the field, when you watch the Ravens play, he was athletically diminished. He did deal with a lot of those injuries, so that's the reason I bumped him down a few spots lower than you had him. In the past, I would say he's the best tight end in the NFL, so I'm not opposed to saying nice things about Mark Andrews. He certainly is an elite red zone threat. What he's able to do down there with Lamar Jackson is special. I just am dinging him more for those injuries and what looks to me like being slightly athletically diminished.
I disagree with that. It says maybe if he's fresh off an ankle tweak or something, you can see him slowing down a little bit. But Mark Andrews had plenty of moments last year where he showed he was still a really high-level athlete.
Now, number 6, a player you already mentioned. I have Tucker Kraft. I think he has quietly become one of the best tight ends in the NFL. In his rookie year, he wasn't a first-round pick, so he didn't come in with a ton of pedigree, but he was very productive, had 355 yards, 2 touchdowns. Last year, doubles the yardage total, essentially, adds another 5 touchdowns on top of that, and at 6'5", 260, he is certainly someone that defenses are going to have to struggle to defend. So I think he offers a lot to the Packers offense. Like I already mentioned, I think he's going to continue to become a stronger focal point, and I think he's going to be very productive in 2025.
Yeah, as I already mentioned, I could definitely see myself moving him up as time goes on. I just don't think he's going to get quite the amount of targets he needs to truly be that guy, but most broken tackles in the league for a tight end. Awesome player to watch, really fun. It sucks the Vikings have to play him twice a year. Their tiny little Ivan Pace and Blake Cashman linebacker duo. Maybe the old man and Harrison Smith can handle his kneecaps, but great player. I'm not going to push too hard on you having him at 6. At number 5, I've got Sam Laporta. Very functional blocker, benefited a lot from what was around him at the offensive tackle position. One of the better tight ends in football, but had a lot of scheme stuff go his way. You mentioned Dallas Goedert got open a ton. No one was really covering him because there was so much around him. I kind of feel that more so applies to Sam Laporta. Both Ben Johnson and the amount of weapons on that Lions team got him a lot of wide open balls deeper than they really should have been. Did a lot with those passes, don't get me wrong. He's no scrub, he's no jamoke. 7 touchdowns, 750 yards. Great player. I just think the 5 spot is about where I have him right now. I don't remember where I put him last year. Probably a spot or 2 higher, but I'm just slightly moving him down a little bit. There's also the fact he's going to be in a first-year offense, or the first year of a new offense, which will probably ding his production just a little.
Well, I know the guy I have at 5, you have at 4, so I'll address TJ Hockenson first, and then we can kind of go back and forth on the 2 and why we'd prefer one over the other. I have TJ Hockenson at 5 simply just because of that ACL injury, and we didn't get to really see him play until the middle of the season, and it was hot and cold. He had a big game for 9 catches, 114 yards against the Bears last year, or in the playoff game, 5 catches, 64 yards, and a touchdown still, and where they struggled against the Rams for the totality of that offense. So a healthy TJ Hockenson is an absolute elite receiving threat, someone that is a problem for defenses to deal with. But I don't think he's necessarily the highest level blocking tight end in the NFL, and we just don't know what he's going to look like or continue to look like with that ACL injury.
I get that sentiment. The problem with it is he didn't end last season injured. He came back and then was the effective tight end we saw in the back half of 2024. He's still one of the best receiving threats in the game. Won a lot of people their fantasy leagues, so they picked him late and stashed him on the bench. Had 10 more yards per game than Laporta. Now, he didn't have any touchdowns. This is why I'm going to get into Hockenson being at 4 instead of 5 for me. I mean, I don't push too far back on you having him up there. I get it, but he was also playing with a quarterback who just did not complement his skill set. Sure, he could hit post and corner routes, Darnold, but he just couldn't do anything over the middle. He couldn't do comebackers, curls, slants, drags. Nothing like that was really in Darnold's wheelhouse to consistently do. That's where Hawks as best me. Just give him the ball over the middle in space, let him break one tackle against the linebacker, hope Kirby Joseph isn't on the field so he can go unmolested, and let him work. He was in a bad spot to do that with a rather dysfunctional short yardage passing quarterback in 2024. So I think he's going to be better with JJ in 2025. We saw Colston Loveland, a similar tight end, good at getting open against zones, do great work in college with McCarthy, and I kind of think Hawks going to fill into that role.
Yeah, and I only have a 1 spot lower than you do, but the reason I gave Sam Laporta the edge over Hockenson is, 1, because of health, and he is just so willing to do whatever the Lions need of him to win. He can give you 10 targets for 7 catches in what was a close 6-point loss to the Bills. He'll give you 3 catches for 6 yards and 2 touchdowns in a 3-point win versus the Bears. 1 catch for 25 yards and a 2-point win versus the Vikings.
Hold on, whoa. So Hawkinson's inconsistency is an issue, but when Laporta has these weird off games where he only has 25 yards, that's him doing whatever it takes to win.
He is a high-level run blocker. He is willing to contribute in any way you ask of him. I think a big part of when people were picking him as the number 1 tight end off the board, and when it comes to fantasy last year, they weren't taking into account the crowded nature of that Lions offense and how many mouths they had to feed, and the fact that they want to be a run-centered offense. I think from a fantasy perspective, people didn't take that into account, and I think that can be attributed to some of these games where he didn't have a lot of targets, but I think he's willing to do whatever the Lions ask of him to win. He's good in every role you could possibly want a tight end. Good route runner, good at getting open against zone coverage, good run blocker. He does everything at a high level.
I push back a little bit on that good run blocker assessment. I don't think he's in some different stratosphere than Hockenson. I think those two are very similar. It's just when you put Sam Laporta and Penei Sewell next to each other, Penei Sewell being one of, if not the best run blocking tackle in all of football, yeah, he's going to get some pretty good pancake blocks, some knockdowns. He's going to be able to climb to linebackers a lot easier than even Hockenson was lined up next to Cam Robinson or Brian O'Neill. No disrespect to Brian O'Neill, but he's not Penei Sewell. So I question the truly high-level blocker. I think those two are rather comparable in that field. Pass blocking, Hawkinson's clearly got Laporta a better pass blocker, but how often do you really want your tight end if he's one of these true elite receiving threats into pass block? Kind of not a relevant skill, but a less impactful skill than being a good run blocker. But we don't need to mince words too much. We agree they're both in the same range. They're not one of the top 3, certainly.
And I think the top 3 is where we see 3 tight ends that are truly game changers that teams can build their offenses around.
And number 3 is my concession to the slot tight ends. It's where I've got Brock Bowers. And I really don't view Brock Bowers as a tight end, but I also don't think I could get away with putting him as my 7th or 8th best wide receiver in football. So here he is at number 3 on the tight ends list. Shocker. A lot can be said about getting a gazillion targets from Aiden O'Connell. But Brock Bowers did a ton of those targets. Used his speed, his athleticism to get away from safeties and quarterbacks, broke a ton of tackles, led all tight ends in receiving yards, if not yards per game, 5 touchdowns, a really dysfunctional Raiders offense. Maybe Geno Smith comes in and with Ashton Jitty, they run it more and they spread it around more. His production dips down a little bit in 2025. But he's just an awesome receiving threat. You can't not have him on the list. You can't not have him any spot lower than 3. Him not being a blocker is why I've got him down at 3. If he did consistently have that hand in the dirt, which is not what the Raiders need him to do by any means, but if that was part of his game plan, I would certainly move him up.
I certainly value more just the fact of what he offers from what he does on the field receiving, as far as why I have him higher on the list. But did him being a rookie not factor into you potentially ranking him higher, and the fact that there's maybe more potential for him to be even better in year 2?
Not really, no. I mean,
okay, well,
I don't think he's going to be better in year 2 just because I think the Raiders are actually going to run the ball. I mean, what do you define as better? I don't think he's going to be more productive when he gets less targets. Better is an eye test thing? Yeah, then maybe I could say he's better and move him up a spot. But I have him here because I think, frankly, Tucker Kraft has a better eye test than him, but in terms of just raw production, Bowers is way over him.
Well, we're going to differ on that a little bit. And at number 3, I have Trey McBride, who's been one of the most impressive players in the NFL over the last 3 years when it comes to his year-to-year improvement. As a rookie, did not do a whole lot. 29 catches, 265 yards. Sophomore season goes to 81 catches, 825 yards. Last year, 111 catches, 1,100 yards. For anyone that watched the Cardinals offense last season, he was the best player on the field besides the quarterback, depending on how you feel about Kyler Murray.
No. He was better than Kyler Murray. Let's not mince words. You've got him listed as your number.
Best and most.
You've got him listed as your number 3 tight end. Kyler Murray is, if you're being generous, the 10th best quarterback in football. Come on now.
He was a matchup nightmare for defenses to deal with. The only reason I have him at 3 instead of 2 or 1 is he hasn't really proven to be a high-level red zone threat, but maybe you chalk that up to just because of who his quarterback is in Kyler Murray, or he might struggle a little bit more in the red zone, or he may just run it in himself in the red zone.
Yeah, I got McBride at 2. Let me talk about him for a bit. Trey McBride is why I've completely given up hope in Kyler Murray. Both the combination of just not targeting him in the red zone when he's maybe not creating the most separation, but there isn't much separation to create when you're only playing with 15 yards. And not trying to put the ball in his hands, scrambling around, prolonging plays, and just not finding him, not having faith in one of the most prolific pass catchers at the tight end position in the league, a 25-year-old monster. That's driving me nuts. It's kind of why I have a higher opinion of Marvin Harrison Jr. than most people. I think Murray is really holding both those guys back to a certain extent. He can do things with the football most others can't, but he also can't throw the ball consistently to a player who is not creating 3 yards of separation or more. McBride's awesome, great blocker, which I don't think you really mentioned a ton. Very willing. He certainly has improved in that aspect as time has gone on. Came into the league, was getting blown off the ball by linebackers and defensive ends. Now can actually stand up to them in both the run game and in pass protection. Raw statistical production up there with anyone. More yards per game than Brock Bowers, 71.6. But the crippling lack of receiving production has gotten the crippling lack of receiving touchdowns does have some people down a bit further on him, which it's not his fault. There's no other way I can put it. It's not his fault.
Yeah, and I can see why you have him only 1 spot higher than me. It's not like we're that far off with our placement of him. I can see why you would maybe not be that worried about it. I just think we just haven't seen it. We haven't seen the red zone production actually happen. It hasn't taken place.
It's a concept. I get it. I really do.
So that's the only reason I discredit him for that. But you're really
splitting hairs
when it comes to the top 3 guys, in my opinion. At number 2, I have George Kittle, which will probably make 49ers fans irate, but I get it. The only reason he's not at 1 for me is just because of how high I am on Brock Bowers. What George Kittle has been able to do on the 49ers over the last 2 years really has been incredible. I think the most impressive thing about George Kittle's game is just the number of yards he averages per reception. 14.2 yards per catch last year. A lot of people think of him as a run blocking, he's very good at run blocking, and I think some people maybe forget just how impressive his big playability is, and I think 21 plays, over 20 plus yards last season. I think that's incredible. He is a focal point of the 49ers offense, and it is someone defenses are scared to play every single week.
Yeah, outside of Trent Williams, he's the best player in the 49ers. He's my number 1 guy. People forget at one point in time he held the single season receiving yards record for all tight ends. If he's not one, he's your second best receiving threat as tight end. 8 touchdowns, monster in space, can run over defensive ends, outside linebackers so they leak out to him, destroys safeties, destroys cornerbacks, destroys linebackers, and is arguably the best blocking tight end in football outside of guys like Will Dissly who just specialize in it. Kittle's awesome. He's everything you can want in tight end. The only things you can ding him on is the injury history. Missed 2 games last season. That could be a factor, I guess. And he's going to be, I believe, 32 by the time next season ends. So maybe you think he starts slowing down. I don't. If he's on the field, he is the guy defenses are worrying about. I am more concerned, if I'm a defensive coordinator, planning on how to stop George Kittle than I am about CMC, Brandon Ayuk, or Ricky Pearsall.
Yeah, the small injury history and his age is the only thing that kind of made me bump him down a little bit, because we know what George Kittle is. He's not going to get much more awesome from how good he already is. And Brock Bowers, I think a little bit of the opposite. A lot of this is projection. I think he's going to be even better in year 2 in the Raiders offense. Last year, he had the best rookie tight end receiving season of all time. Close to 1,200 yards, 5 touchdowns, 112 catches, and I understand the notion that he had 144 targets. Some people might say he was a target merchant, but the quality of his touches in the Raiders offense this year is just going to go up. He's going to have a better quarterback throwing him the ball in Geno Smith. With Ashton Genty in the backfield, there's actually going to be a run game for opposing defenses to have to worry about. Last year with Zamir White and whatever that offensive line was, they had the worst rushing attack in the NFL, and he was the only thing the Raiders offense had going for him. So will his targets probably go down? Yes, but I think the quality of those targets are going to increase. We are going to see him over the course of his career, maybe not right away next season, but we're going to see him probably improve all his skill sets, whether it's route running, as a blocker, getting open against zone coverage, all the different things you want a tight end to be good at. So I think he's going to be the best tight end in the NFL this year.
You know, I really do hate when people say, oh, Brock Bowers had the best rookie receiving tight end season ever, when Mike Dick had close to 1,100 yards and 12 touchdowns in 14 games as a rookie for the Chicago Bears. That grinds my gears a little bit, while also being an elite blocker, mind you. But that is completely unrelated to the overall point. I don't hate the projection with Bowers. I personally don't think he is going to get that high. I think he's going to regress a little bit statistically, given what has been added to that Raiders offense and where those touches will be going. But I don't hate him at 1. Clearly, have him in my top 3. Not a bad player by a stretch of the imagination. Certainly not as grand of a targets merchant as a Malik Neighbors or someone like that.
Malik Neighbors target. We don't need to get into the Malik Neighbors debate in the tight end video. I would disagree with that
Well, no, you're
sentiment.
talking about Brock Bowers. He's basically a wide receiver.
I would disagree with the Malik Neighbors target merchant sentiment. For the record.
For the record? All right. Well, I'll let you do the outro for the record.
That has been our tight end rankings. Let us know what your top 10 would look like down in the comments below. Who do you think had the better top 10 between me and Isaiah?
Oh, they're definitely going to say you. I put Will Dissly at 10. These people are not appreciative of the blockers.
Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you in the next one.